Symphony orchestras are in trouble. While culture changes everywhere, the culture of orchestras seems frozen in time. But the Chicago Sinfonietta thinks we have a better way. We think of ourselves as an activist orchestra. What does that mean? We believe that by harnessing the incredible power of classical music and the ability to bring people together in celebration, we can proactively change our communities for the better. Now, I was raised in Northbrook in the 1950s, and both of my parents were involved in the civil rights movement. So social justice has been a part of my life since my earliest memories. So when Chicago Sinfonietta invited me to become their executive director 15 years ago, I jumped at the chance. Now, perhaps some of you don't know what the Chicago Sinfonietta is, what we look like, what we sound like. Well, let me give you a little brief taste. Does not exactly look like your grandparents' orchestra, does it? So the Chicago Sinfonietta was founded by Maestro Paul Freeman. Paul Freeman was born in Richmond, Virginia in the 1930s, and as a young child, he and his 12 siblings all gathered around the radio every Saturday afternoon to listen to the New York Philharmonic. And this is where Paul discovered his love of classical music. He started studying clarinet, but as a teenager, he decided he wanted to be a conductor. So he spoke to his instructor and asked about how to do so. And the instructor said to him, "Paul, people like you are not allowed to be conductors." In spite of that, Paul went off to Europe to study conducting, won a very prestigious conducting competition, and came back to the United States. And in 1968, he was invited to conduct the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra. He flew into Atlanta late at night, and as he was walking to get his bags, he saw Dr. Martin Luther King waiting to fly out to another destination. He had met Dr. King a couple of years earlier at a Nobel Peace Prize event that they both attended. So he went up and he said, "Dr. King, I'm sure you don't remember me." And before he could even finish the sentence, Dr. King said, "Maestro, what brings you to Atlanta in the middle of the night?" And Paul said, "I'm here to conduct the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra, the first Negro to ever be invited to do so." Dr. King looked him in the eye and he said, "Glory, hallelujah, the last bastion of elitism." 3 weeks later, Dr. King was assassinated in Memphis. And Paul decided then and there that if he ever had a chance to champion for other people's opportunities, he would do so. And in 1987, he came to Chicago and he founded the Chicago Sinfonietta, the nation's most diverse orchestra. So what makes an activist orchestra? What are the elements that are employed? Well, for the Chicago Sinfonietta, it starts with our mission statement. We champion diversity, equity, and inclusion by creating community through bold symphonic experiences. But in addition to that, we're an activist orchestra in other realms. We provide educational programs for over 3,000 students in Chicago and DuPage County. And for pretty much most of these kids who all come from low-income, diverse schools, this is the first time they will have ever seen a classical musician or heard a symphony orchestra. We also go into some of Chicago's most underrepresented and underserved communities. Austin, back at the yards, and North Lawndale. And again, we bring music and services that these communities never see, that the rest of us really take for granted. And probably the most important program that we created started 12 years ago. It's a program called Project Inclusion. It's a 2-year fellowship program that seeks to identify the most talented, early career, diverse musicians, conductors, and arts administrators. And the reason that we created this program because the metrics of symphony orchestras are embarrassing. When you look at the musicians on stage at America's orchestras, less than 5% are from diverse backgrounds. And when you think about the music that orchestras program and perform, less than 1% is composed by women. It's stunning. But the Chicago Sinfonietta's activism goes beyond these programs. Our concert programs embrace disruptive innovation as well. And so the first clip I want to show you is a program that we did 3 years ago called Emotion. And we thought it would be really cool if we took some of the most iconic classical music ever written, Tchaikovsky's Swan Lake, and invited 2 hip-hop dance troupes to re-choreograph it and reinterpret it. So this clip that I'm going to show you actually happened about a month after the concert at a fundraising event that we did. And you'll see members of the Footwork Kings dancing Khachaturian saber dance in a way that you've never seen before. Now, when you come to a Chicago Sinfonietta concert, you can just sit and listen if that's your preference, but we also invite audience members to actually engage with the music and the theme of the concert. So this depicts some of the people that came to a percussive dance concert that we produced a few years ago, learning how to do tap dance steps. We had people of all ages and backgrounds, and at one point we had over 150 audience members learning how to do basic tap dance steps. Then they went into the concert hall and they saw some of the greatest percussive dancers in the world perform with the orchestra, but they knew what it felt like. The next example I want to share with you is a concert that we did 3 years ago called More Than a Letter. We felt that it was important for an activist orchestra to showcase the contributions that LGBTQ composers, conductors, and soloists have added to the classical music canon. And in this concert, we showcased Sarah Davis Buchner, a transgender pianist, Michael Morgan, an out gay African-American conductor, as well as all of the repertoire on the concert was created by LGBTQ composers. The audience engagement activities we had included an organization called Video Out that goes around the country and collects coming out stories by LGBTQ people and then posts them online and shares them with everybody else. The next concert that I'm going to talk about is a concert that we did along the theme of Dia de los Muertos, or Day of the Dead. And we did this concert 7 years ago, about 6 years before Disney's Coco, I should say. And in this case, we thought it would be really interesting to take one of the most iconic works ever written about death, Mozart's Requiem, and reinterpret it. So we put the choir in costumes, masks, and we gave them a little choreography. This is the Chicago Sinfonietta's version of Mozart's Requiem. Again, we had audience engagement activities, people coloring masks. We had face painters working with the audience members. We had a Mexican dance group do a demonstration at the intermission. But my favorite part of this concert is we had a 3-flight wine tasting with each one of the wines tied to one of the pieces of repertoire that we performed. You never know what will happen at a Sinfonietta concert. So what will the Chicago Sinfonietta do next to stay an activist orchestra? Well, we will continue to embrace concert themes that are relevant and timely. And at the opening concert of this season, we actually did a concert dedicated to global climate change and finished the performance with Beethoven's Symphony No. 5, which is often referred to as the Fate Symphony. And by closing this concert with Beethoven 5, we were inviting the audience to contemplate the question, what do we do next? What are we going to do to help meet perhaps the greatest challenge that mankind has ever faced? We will also continue to champion for diversity, equity, and inclusion in classical music so that our orchestras actually reflect the communities that they represent. And we will continue to embrace disruptive innovation and constantly try to reinvent ourselves, and by doing so, model change in the classical music world, which so desperately needs it. Now, I'm going to leave you with one last example of disruptive innovation, and this is probably the most iconic thing that we've ever done. We did a collaboration with a 30-piece punk marching band called Mukapatsa, and we were performing Tchaikovsky's 1812 Overture. And in this clip, the marching band are depicting the French army, the Chicago Sinfonietta musicians are depicting the Russian army at the climactic battle of the War of 1812. Now, do you know who wins? There go the cannons. And the French begin to die. And the Russian army, of course, emerged victorious. I'm going to leave you with this. I think we need to demand and ask more of our orchestras. We need to ask them to be reflective of the communities that they serve. We need them to embrace innovative disruption so that they remain relevant. And we need them to harness the power of symphonic music to make important changes in our society. Thank you.